I moved in with a stranger 4 months ago because I couldn't afford rent alone anymore. And I've spent every night since then wondering if that decision is going to be the reason I disappear. Her name was Sare. At least, that's the name on the lease. The name she gave the landlord. The name I called her for the first 3 weeks before I learned it probably wasn't real at all. She answered an ad I posted online for a roommate, showed up to view the apartment looking completely ordinary, pretty in a soft, forgettable way, polite, quiet, the kind of tenant every landlord dreams of. She paid her half of the deposit in cash. She never complained about anything. And for the first month, I thought I'd gotten unbelievably lucky. The strangeness started small enough that I explained it all away. She never seemed to eat in front of me. Not once, though the refrigerator emptied steadily, like someone was eating plenty when I wasn't looking. She kept her door locked at all times, even when she was inside, even during the day. And she had this way of standing perfectly still in doorways, just watching me for a few seconds too long before saying anything. Like she was deciding something about me the way you'd size up a meal before deciding how to eat it. I told myself she was just private, introverted, different cultural habits. Maybe since she'd mentioned coming from a small village I'd never heard of and couldn't find later no matter how I searched. I wanted to believe the version of her that made sense. Because the alternative meant admitting I'd let a stranger into my home who might not be entirely human. And that's not a thought your brain lets you sit with easily. 3 weeks in, I woke up around 3 a.m. to the smell of something rotten, sweet and wrong, drifting under my bedroom door. I told myself it was the trash. It wasn't trash night. I got up anyway, half asleep, and walked into the hallway to find her door open for the first time since she'd moved in. I shouldn't have looked inside. I know that now. But some part of me needed to understand what I was living with. Her room was almost entirely empty. No photos, no clothes hung up, no signs of a life being lived there at all except a single mattress on the floor. And she was standing at the far end of it, back to me, completely still, facing the wall like she'd been placed there rather than standing there on her own. I whispered her name. She didn't turn around, but she answered. And her voice sounded different than it had that afternoon. Lower, rougher, like something speaking through a throat that wasn't built quite right for human words. "You're up late," she said. "Go back to sleep. I'm almost done." Almost done with what? I didn't ask, because something in my body was screaming at me to leave before I found out. I backed away and closed my door and didn't sleep again until sunrise. The next morning, she was completely normal again, sipping tea at the kitchen table, smiling, asking about my day like nothing had happened, like I hadn't seen what I'd seen. I almost convinced myself I'd dreamed it. Almost. It was my coworker, Bayu, who finally said something that made the pieces click into place, though I hadn't told him anything yet. He'd come over to help me move a bookshelf, and the moment he stepped into the apartment, his face changed completely. He asked, very carefully, whether my roommate ever left her back exposed around me, whether I'd ever seen the back of her neck or her spine when she wore backless clothing. I said I hadn't paid attention. He told me to start paying attention because the old stories his grandmother used to tell described a kind of spirit that wears a woman's face perfectly, walks and talks and laughs like anyone else, except for one detail that never changes no matter how convincing the disguise is. A hole in her back, hollow all the way through, right between the shoulder blades, hidden under hair or clothing, the one flaw in an otherwise flawless imitation of being human. He called her Kuntilanak. He said the name like it physically hurt him to say it out loud. I laughed it off in front of him. I had to. But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about every long-sleeve shirt she'd worn since she moved in. Every high collar, every excuse she'd made to never change clothes in front of me, even casually. 2 nights later, I got my answer. And I wish more than anything that I hadn't gone looking for it. She'd fallen asleep on the couch during a movie, something she'd never done before, always retreating to her locked room the moment the credits started rolling. Her shirt had ridden up slightly at the back as she slept, just enough to see skin. I told myself I wasn't going to look. I looked anyway. There was a hole in her back. Not a wound, not a scar, an actual absence. Dark and hollow, exactly where her spine should have been. Like someone had scooped a piece of her out entirely, and the skin had simply closed around empty space. And as I stared at it, unable to breathe, unable to move, her head turned toward me in her sleep, slow and mechanical, eyes opening halfway, and she smiled without waking up at all. I didn't sleep in that apartment again. I packed a bag that night where she slept, left half my things behind, and stayed at Bayou's place for 2 weeks straight, terrified to go back even during the day. When I finally worked up the courage to return with him beside me to collect the rest of my belongings, her room was completely empty. No mattress, no sign she'd ever lived there. The landlord swore up and down that no one named Sari had ever signed the lease, that the second bedroom had been vacant the entire time I'd lived there, and that I'd been paying full rent alone for 4 months exactly as agreed. I have the bank statements showing a second deposit that never should have existed if I'd been living alone. I have photos of her on my phone from move-in day, smiling in the doorway of the apartment. I look at them sometimes late at night, when the smell of something sweet and rotten drifts faintly under my new bedroom door, and I wonder if she found somewhere else to stay, or if she simply learned, after however many decades of wearing other names, exactly how much a person needs to see before they finally decide to run. My son has been missing for 6 days and the police have stopped looking. Not because they don't care, because there's nowhere left to look. I'm the only one who still believes he's alive. And I'm the only one who heard what Took him say. His name before it happened. I need to go back to the beginning so you understand why nobody believes me. My husband and I had been fighting for months before that night. The kind of fighting that happens behind closed doors but bleeds into everything else. Into the silence at dinner. Into the way our son, Adi, 6 years old, started flinching whenever voices got too loud. I'm not proud of what our house sounded like that year. There were nights I raised my voice at him for things that weren't his fault, small things, spilled juice, forgotten homework, nothing that deserved the anger I gave it. There were nights his father did worse, slamming doors hard enough to rattle the windows, saying things a 6-year-old shouldn't have to memorize. We told ourselves children forget. We told ourselves a lot of things. Comfortable lies that let us keep living the way we were living. We lived on the edge of a small village outside the city, where the houses thinned out into overgrown yards and the tree line started right where the paved road ended. Behind our house was a stretch of old banyan trees that the neighbors avoided after dark. Though nobody ever explained exactly why, just that you didn't go there once the sun went down. And you definitely didn't let your children go there. The elderly woman who ran the corner shop used to watch Adi walk toward those trees and call him back inside without ever saying what she was afraid of. I thought she was just being superstitious. I didn't listen closely enough. Adi loved those trees. He said a woman lived in them who sang to him when he was sad, a soft lullaby, with no words he could ever repeat back to me. I thought it was an imaginary friend, the kind of thing lonely children invent when the adults around them are too busy fighting to notice they're lonely at all. I didn't ask enough questions. I regret that more than anything else I've ever done in my entire life. The night it happened, my husband and I had one of the worst fights of our marriage. Voices raised, things said that couldn't be taken back. Years of resentment finally breaking the surface all at once. Somewhere in the middle of it, Adi slipped out the back door in his pajamas, barefoot, and none of us noticed until almost an hour later, when the silence in his room felt too complete, too still. We searched the yard first, calling his name into the dark, our voices already cracking with panic. Then the tree line, My husband grabbed a flashlight and we pushed through the overgrown grass, branches scraping at our arms, our voices breaking apart with every shout. And that's when I heard it, a woman's voice, low and soft, coming from somewhere deep in the banyan trees, singing a lullaby I didn't recognize, gentle in a way that made my skin crawl more than any scream could have. I called out to her, thinking maybe a neighbor had found him, some kindness in the dark I hadn't expected. The singing stopped instantly, mid-note, like someone had pressed pause on the world itself. Then a voice answered me, and it wasn't a voice that belonged to anyone I knew. It was too smooth, too calm, layered strangely, like two voices speaking at once, one gentle and one much older underneath it, ancient in a way that made the hair rise on my arms. "He's safe now," it said. "You don't want him." "Not really." "I heard you." I froze completely, every muscle locked. My husband grabbed my arm so hard it left a bruise that lasted 2 weeks, because he'd heard it too, and his face had gone the color of ash in the moonlight. We pushed forward anyway, deeper into the trees, flashlight shaking violently in my hands until the beam caught something hanging from one of the lower banyan branches. Hair. Long, tangled, impossibly long hair, draped down from something crouched in the dark hollow of the trunk. Back turned to us, cradling something small against her chest, rocking it gently side to side. I said his name, just his name over and over, my voice breaking apart with every syllable, until it barely sounded like a word anymore. She turned her head slowly, and even now I don't have the words to describe her face the way it deserves. Skin sagging and gray, stretched too loose over sharp bones. Breasts hanging long against her stomach. The way the old stories describe her, though, I never believed the old stories were real until that exact moment. Her eyes were sunken, ancient, and impossibly sad, sadder than anything I've seen on a living face, sadder than grief itself. And in her arms, wrapped against her like she'd done it 1,000 times before, was Eddie, asleep, breathing steadily, unharmed. His small face peaceful in a way I hadn't seen in months. "You raise your voices around him," she said, and her voice cracked with something that sounded almost like grief of her own. "You forgot he was listening." "I didn't forget. I never forget." My husband lunged forward without thinking, and she moved faster than anything with a body that broken should be able to move, sliding backward into the hollow of the tree with our son still cradled against her chest. And then the hollow was simply empty, dark, ordinary bark, as if there had never been a woman there at all, as if the last 2 minutes had been erased from the world. We didn't sleep that night. We haven't really slept since, not properly, not without waking every hour to check the silence of the house. The village elder we finally spoke to, an old woman who'd lived beside those trees her whole life and buried more secrets than she'd ever tell us, told us what we were both too afraid to say out loud ourselves. Wewegombel, she called her, a spirit who takes children who are neglected or mistreated by their parents, hiding them away in the hollows of old trees, caring for them with a tenderness their own homes failed to give them. "She isn't cruel," the elder said, watching my face carefully as she spoke. "She's the opposite of cruel. That's what makes her impossible to fight, impossible to hate the way you want to hate something that took your child. She only returns a child once she believes in whatever way spirits believe things. That the home waiting for him has actually changed. I asked her how long that usually takes. She wouldn't answer me directly. She just looked at my hands, still trembling in my lap, and looked away. And something about her silence frightened me more than a straight answer ever could have. It's been 6 days. My husband and I don't fight anymore. Not because we've resolved anything between us, but because we're both too afraid the sound will reach the tree line again. Too afraid it will decide we haven't changed enough, that we need more time. That Adi needs more time away from us to heal from a home we built without meaning to break him. Every night I stand at the edge of those banyan trees and I call his name, softly now, gently, the way you're supposed to speak to children. The way I wish I'd spoken to him every single day before this happened. Some nights I swear I hear the lullaby again, faint, far off, and beneath it, so quiet I could be imagining it, I hear him laughing. That same laugh he had before the fighting started. Before the house got too loud for a 6-year-old to feel safe in it. I don't know if that means he's safe. I don't know if that means she's still deciding, still watching, still waiting for proof neither of us knows how to give. All I know is that last night, for the first time, the singing stopped the moment I arrived, and a voice I now recognize far too well whispered 4 words into the dark before the forest went silent again. 4 words that have replayed in my head every hour since. You're almost ready, Mom. I have a video on my phone right now that I've watched maybe 200 times, and I still can't decide if showing it to anyone would protect me or get me killed. So instead, I'm telling you the story first, and you can decide for yourself what you'd do with proof like this. I moved to a quiet village on the edge of Bali for 6 months, renting a small house through a local agent. Drawn by the cheap rent and the promise of a slower pace of life after years of city burnout. My neighbor was an older woman named Banyan, always polite, always offering me fruit from her garden over the low fence between our properties. She lived alone, kept meticulously to her routines, and every single night, without fail, she went to bed at exactly 9 p.m. I know this because her bedroom light clicked off at the same time every night for the entire first month I lived there, precise enough that I could set a clock by it. I didn't think anything was strange about her until my landlord, a kind but nervous man who checked on the property every few weeks, casually mentioned one afternoon that I should always keep a small dish of chili and lime near my doorstep at night. When I asked why, he laughed it off, said it was just an old habit from his grandmother, nothing serious. But he didn't meet my eyes when he said it, and something about the way he glanced toward Wayan's house before walking away told me it wasn't nothing at all. I started asking around gently, the way you do when you don't want to seem like the ignorant foreigner who takes local superstition too seriously. An older man who ran a small warung nearby was the one who finally explained it properly, in a hushed voice, glancing over his shoulder before he spoke. He told me about Leek, a kind of practitioner of black magic, almost always appearing to be an ordinary person by day, indistinguishable from any other neighbor, any other kind old woman offering you fruit over the fence. But at night, once everyone else is asleep, the head detaches completely from the body, trailing its own internal organs beneath it like a grotesque tail, and flies through the darkness searching for blood, for illness to spread, for newborns and the vulnerable to feed on. He told me the body stays behind in bed, lifeless and cold until the head returns before dawn to reattach itself, and that this is exactly why locals leave chili and lime, or scatter thorny leaves near doorways. Because the smell and the texture are unbearable to the exposed organs trailing beneath a flying head. I laughed at first. I want to be honest about that. It sounded like exactly the kind of story designed to keep children inside after dark, nothing more than village folklore dressed up to frighten outsiders. But I still put out the chili and lime that night anyway, telling myself it was just harmless respect for local custom, nothing more. 3 weeks later, I woke up at 2 a.m. to the sound of something wet dragging across dry leaves outside my window. Not footsteps, not an animal I recognized. A slow, heavy, dragging sound, wet and rhythmic, moving steadily around the perimeter of my house. I told myself it was a stray dog, a monitor lizard, anything with a rational explanation. But the dragging sound stopped directly beneath my bedroom window. And then I heard breathing, ragged and uneven, far too close to the glass. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and pulled back the edge of my curtain just enough to look outside, already telling myself I'd seen nothing at all. There was a head floating roughly a meter off the ground, facing away from me, thin trailing organs hanging beneath it, swaying gently like something suspended in water rather than air. Long dark hair obscured most of the face, but I recognized the shape of it immediately. The particular slope of the shoulders that weren't there anymore. The same silver streak through the hair that Wayan always tied back into a neat bun during the day. I recorded almost 30 seconds before my hands shook too badly to hold the phone steady. 30 seconds of a woman's head drifting slowly along my property line in complete silence. Organs trailing beneath it like something out of a nightmare, stitched together by a culture I barely understood yet. It never turned towards my window. It simply continued its slow circuit around my house, pausing occasionally near the chili and lime I'd placed by my doorstep, recoiling slightly each time, before finally drifting back toward Wayan's property and disappearing behind her fence. I didn't sleep again that night. I sat with my back against my bedroom door until sunrise, phone clutched in my hand, replaying those 30 seconds over and over until the sky finally turned gray. The next morning, Wayan waved to me over the fence exactly like always, offering a small basket of mangosteens, smiling with the same warmth she always had. I smiled back. I took the fruit. I said nothing at all, because the old man at the warung had told me something else the night before, something that frightened me more than the head itself. He said that leek, once they know they've been seen clearly, once they know there's proof, will do almost anything to silence the witness. Sometimes through illness, sometimes through far more direct means. And that the only real protection is to never let them know you've seen anything at all. So I kept smiling. I kept accepting the fruit. I kept putting out chili and lime every single night, more out of desperate ritual than genuine belief at that point. Unable to fully explain what I'd recorded, but unwilling to test what would happen if I stopped. I moved out 2 months earlier than planned, telling Wayan I'd been offered a job back home, watching her expression carefully for any flicker of something else beneath a polite disappointment on her face. I don't know if she believed me. I don't know if it matters whether she did. I still have the video. I've shown it to exactly one person, a friend back home who watched it twice in silence before asking me, very quietly, whether I still had contact with anyone in that village. I told her no. That was a lie. Wayan still messages me sometimes, small friendly check-ins, asking when I'll visit again, asking if I miss the mangosteens from her garden. I always reply, I'm always polite. I've learned that being seen by something like that means you're marked in a way that distance alone might not undo. And until I understand exactly what that means, I intend to stay exactly as friendly and exactly as far away as I possibly can.